I want to start by setting what I think your expectations can be. We cannot cover every component of ethics, or even more than a couple of ethical situations that leaders are bound to face in less than 10 minutes, let alone 5 to 7. However, what I do think we can do is define ethical leadership, talk through a couple of key components of this definition, and outline some challenges to ethical leadership that everyone in this room will, not might, encounter on the journey to being ethical leaders, all with the intent to stress the importance of being an ethical leader. So what is ethical leadership? It's demonstrating and promoting normatively appropriate conduct through personal actions and interpersonal relations. A lot of words. Take a breath. We're going to break that down. What does it mean to demonstrate and promote? It means you make a personal commitment as a leader to intentionally lead by example and to be metacognizant. How's that for a word of the day? It means that you are constantly thinking about the way your words and actions do or do not promote the values that you want to see normalized within your organization. Think of it as a higher commitment to self-awareness and personal growth. Leadership should always begin internally. A person's efforts as a leader should never begin with their demands of other people. The next part of this definition is, who in your organization defines what is normative? The answer should be the people at the top. The problem is that if people at the top have not made a commitment to ethical leadership, then the conduct that they promote as normal will often be inappropriate, not inclusive, not productive, and oftentimes toxic. Who would want to work long-term for a place where poor standards of behavior are allowed to continue by the very people whose responsibility it is to address them? And finally, personal actions and interpersonal relations. Essentially, that means everything you do. This gets back to that heightened commitment to self-awareness. Every conversation, every small email exchange, every presentation, every staff meeting, every public gathering is an opportunity to promote the values and expectations that you as an ethical leader want to set for yourself and your team. Ethical leadership prevents scandals. It promotes positive internal morale and faith in leadership. It strengthens individual and organizational relationships with stakeholders. Ethical leadership is a mentality that shapes multiple leadership styles. It's rooted in a desire to do right by your team and your organization and the people you serve, rather than to personally get ahead. The goals and values of an ethical leader revolve around teamwork and organizational longevity and how they can provide the greatest service or product or benefit to the community. This is the opposite of the I'm in charge, so what I say goes, regardless of what anyone else has to say about it type of thinking. Be honest for a second, I want everyone to engage with me. How many people in the room or on Zoom have worked with or for another person who prioritized their own rise to the top over the well-being or success of other people? That's a lot of hands, everybody. And the hands that are raised, that's exactly the reason that ethical leadership needs to be talked about. It should be the norm. And instead, there are many people in leadership roles that have never even heard that phrase before. So let's go from there to talk about some actual challenges. The reason I wanted to highlight at least a few challenges to ethical leadership that ethical leaders will face is to bring this subject matter into the realm of the tangible. We've discussed the theories thus far, so now let's talk about the reality. Please remember that I only have so much time here. This is not a comprehensive list of challenges. This is a list meant to get you thinking about the contexts in which you are a leader and the challenges you're going to face as you work towards ethical leadership yourself. Number one, do not make the mistake of assuming that problems always stem from other people. If your team always sees you placing the blame on somebody else, when as a leader, the reality is that the buck stops with you, you will never be able to develop a healthy team morale. This doesn't mean that others don't need to take responsibility for their actions and their mistakes. It does mean that when others fail, you also fail. And you need to work with your team to determine why that is, not to bark out orders and automatically assume that you need to be a stricter leader. Number two, You will encounter people who have values and priorities that differ from yours. Do not make the mistake of assuming that because someone thinks about things differently than you do, that you do not have the same goal in mind. Or worse, that that person cannot still be an asset to you and your team. Furthermore, if someone comes to you wanting to accomplish something differently than the way you want to accomplish something, but their method will be efficient and effective, good for the team, good for the company, do not make the mistake of shutting them down simply because you did not come up with this idea. Being an ethical leader means that you promote someone else's creativity and drive instead of insisting that you need to be the star of the show. And being an ethical leader means doing the right thing even when you do not want to. And I see several people thinking, I know exactly what you're thinking, I'm a good person. Why would I ever not want to do the right thing? Let me give you an example. Let's say someone comes to you that you do not personally like, and they have a great idea for the organization. But if you go with that idea, they're going to get praise for that. You don't want that. You don't like this person. You don't want to promote anything that they've come up with. But it's good for the company. So I reiterate, being an ethical leader means doing the right thing, even when you do not want to. One final challenge I did want to squeeze into this speech is something called mission drift. We use this term a lot in the nonprofit sector, but it applies to all of the sectors. It refers to the temptation to do something outside of your mission because someone else wants you to, or because there's money available to do something, etc. Much of what I've talked about in this speech has had to do with being ethical by bringing in other people. The reason I bring up mission drift is, as an ethical leader, you need to make sure that the ethics, the values, the morals, and the guiding principles that define you and your organization are clearly articulated and widely communicated from the very beginning. The reason for this is because people are going to challenge them. People internally will challenge them. People externally will challenge them. The balancing act that ethical leaders need to perform is keeping an open mind on one hand and keeping yourself and your team grounded in ethical views and practices on the other. Times will change, political landscapes will change, communities will change, and needs will change. And through all of it, you need to hold true to the values that are most important to you, all while learning and growing and innovating at every turn. How you change while staying true to yourself is something that you have to figure out personally. In conclusion, I'll wrap this up quickly. Ethical leaders are introspective. They openly communicate and refer back to the set of values that drive them and that they hope will drive their team. And ethical leaders often have to make hard choices. It's not easy to be an ethical leader. It takes real intentionality, and it's not a one and done thing. However, I can promise you that it's worth it in the short and the long term to be widely viewed as an ethical person and to be respected as such in your leadership roles. I hope you will leave this meeting with the intent to define the ways that you want to be an ethical leader, and that the speech content will motivate you to really be intentional in working toward that goal. Diedelene, I'll hand it back to you.